Welcome to the Connection is the Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Eden Shante. Today I welcome investment counselor Ron Speaker. Throughout this episode, we explore the importance of mentorship, how two profound mentors guided Ron's career in the world of finance, and how he now chooses to give back through being a mentor. His latest endeavor is called Finance Camp, where he intends to mentor 100 youth with the goal of each creating $1 million investment portfolios. Mind you, Ron's mentorship is less about money and more about relationship and providing important life skills. Thanks for joining me, and let's dive right into the show. Connection is the medicine. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Eden. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here, and I really look forward to exploring with you this topic of connection through mentorship and also with finance.
A little different than your usuals.
One of the things that I like to do when we begin the show or the episode is to have you share an intention, and then I'll share an intention and then offer an exercise of connection so that you and I can drop in and our listeners can drop in, and then we'll head into the body of the interview.
I think my intention is to support this wonderful venture that you've got going on, because to give more people exposure to your audience and your diverse friends is really incredible. You've been generous to me for many years, so it's very easy to participate and help give back. And to your audience, if there's any stories that I may say that could inspire them and give them a hope about how incredible the world is awaiting them, I'm delighted to do.
It's really beautiful. I think in this day and age, it's important to have hope and to see the light side when so much dark is being projected through various sources. So I really appreciate your PMA, positive mental attitude, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, my intention for today is to connect with myself and with you and hold space so that we can allow the medicine of connection to flow through. The podcast is Connection is the Medicine, and our foundation is Connection is the Medicine. And we have found that through connecting to ourselves, to each other, which we're going to explore mentorship today, and through connecting with nature and spirit, that our lives can have more richness and meaning and connection. So I'm really looking forward to holding space and allowing what spontaneously needs to flow through. And we have a structure that you and I have explored, but we also are going to be listening deeply and allowing spirit to flow through us.
Yes.
So I'd like to begin with an exercise of just taking a few breaths. And for those of you who aren't driving, maybe you could just stand or sit and allow your eyes to close. And let your forehead relax. Your eyes can rest in their sockets. Your tongue can touch the roof of your mouth behind your front teeth, allowing your jaw and neck and shoulders just to relax, and allowing your body to just breathe naturally in and out through the nose. Having this attitude of loving kindness towards yourself and towards whatever arises in the realm of sensation, emotion, and thought. Just like welcoming with kindness these friends, and then just returning to the breath and just allowing yourself for just a few moments to feel your feet on the ground, your seat in the chair, and connecting with this beautiful mantra, the human breath. And maybe we can collectively set the intention just to connect with ourselves and each other and this world. To welcome the sacredness, the holiness of life, this incredible opportunity that we have to learn and be of service to the whole, to support each other. Thank you. Thank you.
Your voice is very relaxing.
Ron, I'm grateful for you, for our friendship over many years, and your participation in our foundation, Connection is the Medicine, which is where we're sitting right now at True Nature, one of our locations, the other being in Costa Rica, where you haven't visited yet, but I hope one day you'll bring your family down. So thank you. Thank you for being on our board of trustees in the past, giving of your time so generously. And that's part of what we'll explore today is the way that you've received mentorship and the way that you've paid it forward and offered mentorship to youth, particularly adults, yes, for much of your professional life around finance and guidance, but transitioning, and we'll discuss this later in the episode, your mentorship of youth and your commitment to connecting through finance. So I'd like to begin with you sharing a little bit of your grandfather and your father, and you shared with me previously about how the Great Depression, which was in the early 30s, is that correct?
Early 1930s, post the stock market crash of 29.
Okay, so the stock market crashed in 1929.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking 94 years ago.
Yeah.
And so why don't you just share with us how this experience impacted your grandfather, your father, and you, your family, and how that dovetailed into your relationship, your early relationship with money.
Yeah. Big topic. I think the environments in which we are raised shape our opinions and the way we behave and with money and shape the relationship. So yeah, to go back to the 1930s, my grandfather was the dining captain on the Atlantic Pacific Railroad, and they lived in Washington, D.C., and there was a contest, a jingle contest for the Serta Mattress Company, and my grandfather won the contest with coming up with the jingle, Serta mattress, you can sleep on it, not in it, meaning it was firmer, okay? And he won $300. And so they deposited that $300 into a Washington, D.C. savings and loan in the early 1930s, right ahead of the Depression. And so vivid memory from my father, and the story that was told many times was how he waited in line at 4 years old by his pinky, holding onto his grandfather's hand, for hours, hoping that they would be able to retrieve their $1,200 of entire family savings. And it didn't happen.
Where was this?
This is Washington, D.C., 1932, 33.
Okay.
So imprinted in my father's mind was a distrust of the government and financial institutions, and many aunts and uncles came and lived together. My grandfather was lucky to never lose his job and would bring home food left over from the dining car to feed the family. And then very touching, and as we've communicated, it brings up stories from my past of how my father would say there was very deserving, good-hearted, good people that were knocking on the back door looking for food. And in the Depression, you helped them. So my father's attitude and his early education was about not taking risk, which permeated throughout his life to be a hard worker and a saver, but it really formed his relationship to money that was more of scarcity and fear. He early on rarely had a mortgage on his home, and so he was cash heavy. And if you imagine the circumstances that someone is raised related to the financial markets, it can greatly influence the decisions that you make for the rest of your life. So to the question that you posed of like, why did I get involved in finance? It was maybe just the universe attracting me to a different message, a different worldview. And so I was very lucky at an early age to meet two men in particular that had a completely different worldview of money.
We'll get into your relationship with these two mentors, but as you grew up in this environment with your father, particularly in his ethos around finance, what then led you through, whether it was grade school, middle school, high school, college, to move into what became your career in the financial industry?
All I could think about is I was playing golf in high school, and I went to college on a golf scholarship, and I was a good golfer, but not a great golfer. And so there was a point. My father always had great advice, and he was a great optimist too, despite this fear that he carried his entire life. But he's like, you have to find out if you're good or great at something. And so I was a good golfer, not a great golfer. And he said, if you find out that you're just good, then get on with it. And behind that is my dad played baseball in the minor leagues and then made it to the professional leagues, short period. So he had an understanding of sports. So,
and he was a scout.
He was a scout for the Pirates after Brooklyn Dodgers training camp as a teenager, basically. So at the University of Colorado, after 3 years playing golf, I had to get a job. And I used a golf contact to get me an interview at a company called Berger, which was really the godfather of the mutual fund business. I didn't know this, just luck of the draw.
Like before mutual funds were a thing?
In the early days, yeah. In the small Western world of downtown Denver finance, Bill Berger was the godfather of mutual funds.
Okay.
The East Coast, vanguards in the world had already been started. But in my interview, where I went in, junior year in college.
And this was for a summer job?
This was for a summer internship.
Okay.
And
were you in the business school at that time?
I was in the business school.
Okay.
Yeah. Knew nothing, about finance. I just wanted to get an opportunity. And a golf mentor of mine suggested I go try and take this job that a young man who was going to go to graduate school. So in the interview, where I spent a few minutes with the principals, they said, hey, would you mind taking a handwriting test? Okay. So I go in the conference room and I write out a paragraph. And a woman that worked there had been studying, handwriting analysis. She looked at my handwriting, and then they spoke and they said, look, we appreciate you coming in. Sadly, you don't have very good detail skills, but you've got a good sense of humor.
Really?
I was like, thank you very much. So that was a nice door to shut. And so I went back to the library in Boulder, and I was flipping through Forbes and Fortune magazines, and I've come upon an article about 4 money managers' profiles, as they used to do. 3 were in New York with suits and ties in tall buildings behind big desks, and 1 was sitting in a hot tub in Vail on at the time, the portable, connected to your house phone. And only because the proximity that the company was in Denver did I naively drive down the next day without an appointment, of course. And I walked in and I told them that I had just interviewed at Berger unsuccessfully. And they said, well, we'll speak to you. And
you were honest with them.
Yeah. I just dumb and blind and naive, but that's the perfect way to be. And so I was hired for the very prestigious position at this small growing company to be in charge of the mail clerk. So my entry into Wall Street was at the lowest level possible.
Wow. So you got this position as the mail clerk or in charge of the mail clerk?
No, I'm the only mail clerk.
So what are the responsibilities of a mail clerk?
Distribution.
Sorting and distribution?
Yes. So it's for all our viewers, like imagine back into the early 80s when the primary source of communication was still through the mail. And of course, executives didn't want to bother with opening mail. So my job was to open the mail, which meant I would see it and then organize it. And it was a 20-person company. I was the 21st. And so as I would distribute the mail, oftentimes they're like, can you take this garbage mail out? I've already read it. Now, Wall Street research was a huge thing. That if someone wrote a research report that came out of the research department in New York City and then was mailed, imagine the delay. And so, yeah, but it had the spreadsheets and the numbers and the estimates. There was a particular set of encyclopedias called the S&P guides. And so whenever a company reported, my job was to insert the most recent quarterly update.
Okay.
Well, now I'm standing with all these old ones, and so I basically created my own encyclopedia of S&P 500 companies out of the garbage, the old ones, but I put them in my own set of books. It didn't take long for this to be a rumor in the company that I was collecting mail.
Now, where did you keep these reports? You organized them, and where were they? Were they
Just in the mailroom? There was.
But were they out displayed? Like, could somebody see them?
Yeah, I mean, there was like imagine encyclopedias with inserted one-pagers on companies.
Okay.
So, unknowingly, I was doing something that was maybe a little unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it did catch the attention of Mr. Bailey,
Who was
who was the founder of Janus, who I didn't meet during the interview at all, but he had just heard about this kid in the mailroom causing problems.
Uh-huh.
So he was coming on his 50th birthday, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, what's your driving record look like?" It says fucking spotless. He goes, "All right, we're going to go on the Ride the Rockies, and you're going to drive the sag wagon. And I'm like, and you're going to bring that mail with you?" Like a tub full of mail.
Uh-huh.
So I, after just 2 weeks of being in this company, went out to the airport, picked up a big...
Just 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
You are communicating with the boss. The boss is coming to you and inquiring.
Well, he needed help. He needed to go for it. So
Okay.
I was there, and the best part is I just didn't have any, studying finance. I'm in the mailroom. I didn't even think that was a bad thing. Some kids today might think that's a demotion, but
Yeah.
I was in.
You had a job.
So,
Or an internship.
yeah. I was instructed to drive the wagon to Telluride to pick him up for the beginning of the Ride the Rockies. And there were some other people that weren't going to come with us, but didn't. Okay? So I spent 2 weeks solo with him, with pick him up, meet him at the top of a pass, let him use the bathroom. The first night in Uray, I believe, it was a huge, one, he was upset about the size of the vehicle because the people who didn't arrive, he's like, "Why did you get this 32-foot Pace Aero, this big monster?" I'm like, "You rented it, not me." So he was a little grumpy about the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
And the first night it rained. And then he's like, "Wow, this is pretty sweet, isn't it?" He took a hot shower when everybody else was cold.
Yeah.
And this is all a prelude to say that after the week of him and I together and small, short discussions about Wall Street, he could see that I was a bit interested. So when we returned to Denver and Janus one night, he said, "Look, I want you to meet me at the Tattered Book Cover." Do you remember what the Tattered Book Cover
Yes.
was? The iconic bookstore back before Amazon. Right?
Uh-huh.
And so he presented me with 10 books. And he said, "You have to read," he goes, "read all of these books. And then, if you're still interested, come find me." Just the way he was very mystical in his own way. And so it was a great opportunity to really explore my interest. And I started low, and he partnered me with another gentleman that ended up.
Well, first, how were the 10 books?
Well, it's hard to remember all of them because I wasn't really paying attention back then, but one very memorable one was The Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And so these books weren't just basic stock market analysis books, but they're history and psychology. And it was about, witch South Sea bubbles, tulip bulb crazes, and witch hunts. Like crazy. But just how psychology and groupthink can really change. And so if there's maybe an interesting topic to add is that the world of finance is really somewhat the study of history and human behavior and psychology, fear and greed, the early forms of FOMO, as we started with the crash of 29 that was caused by the excessive speculation in the 20s and the roaring 20s. So these books were kind of to backfill some history to give me a perspective. And I've never had anybody do that before in my life. And so he and the other mentor that I'll speak of were really intellectual fathers that just showed up, or I was lucky enough to walk through a doorway.
And so what was the progression with you at Janus from that internship? Was that the summer between your junior and your senior year?
Yeah, I was working there during my entire senior year. So I had class from 8 to 10:30 or 11. I would drive to Cherry Creek.
Okay.
Because I was excited. The summer was the mailroom, and the fall was working as an analyst who Tom had partnered me with his dear friend Michael McGoldrick, which we'll talk more about.
Michael McGoldrick
was there.
Was also at Janus.
Yes.
I didn't know that connection.
Yes. That's how I met Michael, underneath Tom.
Wow.
So Michael was my more day-to-day supervisor, mentor. We were running a small division inside of a larger company, but still a very small company at the time. It was an incredible gift. And, I just would encourage them, as I talk to the kids these days, that opportunity is just waiting if we're willing to engage with people and connect. There are people that are open to it under their own rules, their own ways, with patience. But, Tom was kind enough to see that I was completely naive, but hungry for information. And he used to say, Ron, I would be driving him around. He would scratch my dashboard and go, you're just scratching the surface. Pay attention to Michael. He's brilliant.
Wow.
It was really inspiring.
Were they friends with each other?
Yes, Michael helped introduce Tom to his original partner. Michael, if you want to start there a little bit, but Michael was the Forrest Gump of finance. The places that he worked and the times that he worked, he was the first professor on the USS Universe, which was like sex, drugs, and rock and roll from the 60s.
What do you mean the USS Universe?
The semester at sea.
Oh, semester.
The very first semester at sea. He was the first economics teacher.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Have you been on semester at sea? I have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
In 1988. What an incredible cultural experience, having the opportunity to be on a ship with incredible professors.
Yeah.
We didn't have Michael because it was maybe after his time.
Yeah.
But what an experience and what a connection.
Interesting. So here's two men that were involved in finance who were more accustomed to taking risk. And Michael was raised with a father that was teaching him the stock market in Seattle, and he went to Amherst College undergrad and Stanford graduate school, and his next door neighbor was Ken Kesey. So he had some interesting friends. And he lived in Aspen and Hawaii, traded on the New York Stock Exchange, the Chicago Board of Trade. Later in his life, he ended up teaching global economic history in Bulgaria at the American University. And he had an incredible worldview with a huge heart and like understanding human rights. And so going back to the Janus days, because I was working the afternoons and Michael was unusual, that we spent a lot of time after work. And so he was kind enough to invite me to dinners and just tell me, like, Ron, do you understand the way the world worked? And that there's still people plowing their fields with oxes in, Eastern Europe, and that these things are going to change, and that there's this parabolic change going on in the world. And so he took me to New York City for the first time in my life, at 20, and we went to Times Square at midnight. But we were there to visit the very famous Pan American World Airways, which at the time was a struggling airline. So here's the quick story. We walk into 57th Street in New York, Pan Am sign up top, and you can imagine going up to the CFO's office. That's this luxurious, spacious place with a massive globe in the corner. I'm completely nervous, wearing a cheap suit, and Michael looks at the CFO at the time and says, look, I want you to know that I understand what your company's about. And he says, well, why would you say that? He says, look, I was raised in Seattle, and as a young boy, my parents took me on the maiden voyage of the Yankee Clipper from Seattle to Nagoya, Japan, wearing our Sunday finest clothes. So talk about connection. What they also taught me is that the human connection with someone that's working with a company, if you can show, a bridge to them, that they were so much more honest. Wall Street and finance puts on a facade, but if you can get to the person and understand their story, then it's hard for them to maybe not tell you the whole story. And so Tom and Michael were great listeners and interviewers, and they just had a depth of knowledge, and I was just basically trying to absorb as much as I could for as long as I was with them.
Well, what I'm gathering is that they had an ability to connect
Yes.
with other human beings. And I'm also understanding that you do too. And maybe that's how you were able to connect with them and they with you, because you both had this openness. Because I'm interested, and I'm sure our listeners are interested, how does a young man, a junior in high school, find
College.
themselves, I'm sorry,
College. That'd be a great start.
in college, find that opportunity and your openness and your vulnerability that allowed you to connect with them and they with you.
I mean, a certain amount of ignorance, if you know too much, it might hold you back. But I think we're all just a heartbeat away from a different life. Who we may meet in the next instant, who we may connect with, the door that we may walk through, could really change the outcome and trajectory of your life. And so I've always had this, I think my father was an optimist despite being raised in the Depression. He was a salesman. And so he connected with people, and you actually knew him in town here when he supervising your project. So
Absolutely.
That ability I think is really important, and that was just given to me innately to be curious about people. And each of these two mentors that I really spent 35 and 40 years of my life with, both have since passed, and that created a whole nother chapter of my life. But for Michael, when we took me to New York City for that Pan Am trip, we went to Harry's Bar in the Plaza Hotel, and he's like, Ron, do you understand where you're sitting? Like, I'm in a bar in New York. It's like, do you understand who sat here before? And the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, and can you imagine the deals that have gone on right here? And so to make a real visual perspective of living history and walking in places that are sacred. You've done some wonderful travel, and to think that you followed the same footsteps it was really inspiring to me. And Michael and Tom both took me all over the world to help understand the way some people might say the way business works, but it's the way the world works. And I had these great connections with people who, say, schooled me several times. Like, you're not listening, Ron. I just said, do you understand the depth of what I'm saying? Oh, okay, thank you. So, I did share with you that Michael had a really wonderful demeanor, and as a young man and having a wonderful father, but my father taught me what he knew, and Michael and others were going to take me to another level. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "My dear boy, it's apparent that you didn't have a good primary education, but what you do next is what matters." And so Janus was growing, and there was a lot of Ivy League students, a lot of brilliant people that were showing up. And, it's good to level up. When you see the competition, it's, to raise the game, to study harder, work harder. And, it was an environment where the carrot was out there if you wanted it. You had to make it yourself. No one's going to point you to the way, which really, there's this concept in business and life about, they say he or she has game. Can't define it. That person gets it figured out. We were talking about a talented young man earlier, and, Mountain Maze had game. He got it done.
Well, tell us more about Mountain Maze.
He was just a young man from the valley that I knew his mother. I met him when he was 10, and since we're here on your podcast, he taught himself all of this, and he was so talented and shared it. He worked at Steve's Guitars and with Ralph, and ran a show for me over there and an event, and he just was passionate. Young people can learn anything these days. It's never been easier. And I was also thinking about you. This podcast is being sent over YouTube. It's the greatest educational tool in a lifetime. It's the new encyclopedia. Mentorship is really important to me because I think I was just so blessed, both from father and friends, and then Tom and Michael, that enjoyed kind of pulling it out and highlighting it.
And so you were with Janus for how many years before you struck out on your own?
21 years. Tom had left before me, and Tom's here in Carbondale, and he's had said many times, he's like, companies have a time where they can be great, but it doesn't last forever. And Tom was a handshake guy. He was a man of actually fewer words, but of great importance, and nobody argued about money. We didn't have to sign contracts. He would look you straight in the eye and say, "Did you understand?" That's a really important agreement because he's offering you clarity. Okay, then we're going to abide by what we just discussed. So it brings in kind of the cowboy wisdom that he always had going on in the back of the cowboy ethic of integrity and trust. And so after Tom had left Janus, I stayed around for a few years before I was really drawn to the mountains. He said, "Ron, there's two things men want in life: dirt and horses." Metaphor, land and a home, and transportation. It was interesting, but he certainly came up here and embedded himself in Western life with true dirt and horses.
Where did he grow up?
Canada,
Okay.
primarily. Yeah, Canada and some Michigan, but since the 60s out west. So I think in life, even here sitting with you, Eden, we have the opportunity to meet and engage and connect with people.
Yeah.
It does take some effort. It does take some risk. And I have just been continually impressed of the people that I've met in my life because I just gave the minimal effort to reach out. And I'll tell you this interesting quick story, but I was in Hong Kong, and Michael, the historian, had said, "Ron, when you're over there in Hong Kong, you should explore this world of Chinese railroad bonds that many collectors think could be worth some value because the Ming Dynasty in the early 1900s, 1870s defaulted. And there's this world of collectors." So I'm reading the China Morning News, and I see a store that collects bonds, So I go through the back streets, and I enter the store, and I'm walking around, and I see this big coffee table book. And I think it was $45 or $55 at the time. And I was traveling a little light, and I really didn't think I could afford it. But it was this author on Chinese railroad bonds. I was going to buy it from Michael at the time. And while I'm there, I look around and I see another, American-looking gentleman. I said, "Hey, are you here because of the article about the store today?" He goes, "No, no." I'm like, "Huh." He looks at me and goes, "Why are you here?" I said, "Oh, I work at an investment firm, and my boss told me to take a look at these Chinese railroad bonds." He goes, "Huh." A few minutes goes by, that nice, delightful pause. He says, "Hey, I'm going to go somewhere else. Would you like to come with me?" This is a stranger in Hong Kong. I'm 21 years old. I'm like, "Okay." We walk through the streets of Kowloon, and we come across these, apartment buildings. And he says, "Well, let's go in here." And
Were you scared?
no, I was so excited. And the gentleman brings out a trunk. It's kind of I guess it's a store. Maybe it's Chinese herbal medicines. And then they say to him, Mr. John, I have bomb for you."
Uh-huh.
And so they open up a trunk, and he starts filtering through these Chinese railroad bonds. And he says, "Look, Ron, buy one or two of these. Just that's a good little starter bond." I know nothing about this. Okay. He goes, "Let's go to this other store." So we walk through the narrow streets, cobblestones, all that, and another person, "Mr. John, I have one for you today." I'm sorry, I apologize for my accent to anybody. And so he buys a few bonds, and he says, "Let me tell you something, Ron." He goes, "If you ever want to see the good shit, you got to be a buyer." He goes, "They won't show you the good stuff unless they know that you're going to be a buyer. So spread a little money and be a frequent customer, and one day they're going to have something that you think is spectacular, and they won't know it." He goes, and so this was this basic lesson of like buy-sell interactions. If you're a frequent customer, you're going to get the phone call. Now, Mr. Bailey was a wizard about the ways of Wall Street. And so he treated the sellers, the stockbrokers, the research analysts, so gratefully. A lot of people on the buy side, those with the money, diminish those on the sell side. So think of all selling agents, whether in the real estate world or at a used car lot. How you treat people relates to how they treat you. And actually, Mr. Bailey used to say, how we treat our employees is how they'll treat our customers. So here's this gentleman telling me how to source good bonds. I was so inspired that after the second one, he's like, "Well, I'm going to go on and have some other things to do. Hope you enjoyed the show." I went back to the store. I'm like, "Oh, this was a great experience."
The original, the first
store, which was a in-house store. And I go to take another look at the book, and he was the author of the book. He was the world's greatest collector of Chinese railroad bonds, and he never told me.
The guy you were speaking
Yes.
with? He was the author of that book?
He was the author of that book about collecting old Chinese railroad bonds.
Ron.
It's unbelievable. But the lesson...
the synchronicity.
Right.
He didn't own that store.
No.
He just happened to be in the store. And he was the author?
Yeah. He was a Canadian that had researched, that potential value because, if you think of societies and they have to expand, and during the railroad expansions, they had to borrow a lot of money like the U.S. did. And, we're on a rail line through here. China had borrowed a lot of money from global investors issuing these beautiful, ornate bonds. And that was the first part of Wall Street that I was involved in. And Michael, of course, being the historian's like, "You should go check this out."
So tell us just briefly, for those that don't know about bonds, which is the business that eventually you went into, correct?
Yes.
Being a financial advisor in a firm that markets or sells or manages bond portfolios.
Yeah. Well, to start, since we're close, I have some bond certificates that many people's grandparents may have seen displayed, but they were usually kept in a safe, and they had coupons. So a bond is a promissory note, usually issued at $1,000 to pay a stated rate of return. Back then it was 4%, 5%, but many people growing up in the late 70s, early 80s remember 10 and 12%. My father, the conservative investor, bought CDs at 12 or 13% while they lasted for a few years. I ended up managing bond portfolios here in Carbondale for clients that wanted to live off their income, off their savings. And so we'd purchase bonds that went up or down in value a bit. And there's government bonds, corporate bonds, and municipal bonds.
But essentially, they're a promissory note where somebody is wanting money to do some type of business. And so in a sense, they're borrowing money from the investor and then paying them back a return.
Right. Which, a bank would lend you money to purchase a home or to build a home or to start a business. And so the public bond markets help facilitate all this lending. And you might really consider that, think of all the factories that were built off borrowed money. So, Amazon borrowed a lot of money from both stockholders and also bondholders. But Ford, GM, Chrysler, all these great American companies, GE, that built things that Americans enjoyed, were financed. And if we lived in an economy that was cash-based, the things that we would have created would have been much more modest. Mm-hmm. So other countries around the globe that don't have as developed financial markets suffer from whether it's venture capital or IPOs that allow companies to come public and spend money, hire employees. So, I look through Wall Street with two lenses. There's a lot of greed. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of promise. There are inventions in this world, and just think of what's going on today as we're in this sixth inning of innovation that is at this most accelerated pace.
The sixth, you're sharing we're in the sixth inning of innovation.
Of massive innovation, if you think from, early power, steam power, electrical power, chemicals, plastics, the early creation of the internet and, early social to now, the Internet of Things and robo-taxis and autonomous. There's this great graph, very complicated, but if you just kind of think of what, we talk about older people, my father, that, what they went through, what they saw, Model Ts, Henry Ford, mass production, industrialization, agriculture economy that, turns into where we are, that this is a fascinating, unbelievable time that has both fraught with perils and worries of AI, but if we could cure disease because of compute power, I don't think that's bad necessarily.
Yeah.
So I was taught to appreciate history with compassion and humility and look at the world through a lens of opportunity. An investor is really someone who's taking risks to try and increase their wealth with an outcome. And you have to be a believer, a naysayer. I was also taught it's good to bet on the home team, right? So I just see the world as this fluid, evolving thing that finance and cryptocurrency and all of this and the evolution of spirituality, it's kind of all happening. There's incredible opportunities. The mere fact that you're going to be able to share your messages to a global population, and there will be someone that may listen to it the day they need it. And you could just have saved a life. And technology was your friend on that.
Thank you for all that. Beautiful. What do you mean by bet on the home team? Share a little bit more about that. What does that mean?
It's more about optimism and, go back to a football game and, if you're not rooting for the Broncos and you're at someone's house who's in the Broncos, you're kind of on the outside. But I want to hope for the best in people, and I want to hope they win. Mm-hmm. And there's just so much commentary out there in the news. I watch business news because business news doesn't highlight every little stabbing and murder in downtown Denver. I can't stand that. Business news is talking about these incredible inventions and connections and combinations. And of course, there'll be the inevitable failures and bankruptcies along the way. Mm-hmm. But I would say it's generally more positive of hope. So I don't bet on the home team is that I want to make investments in things that I think will make the world better. I was recollecting the story that when I moved to Carbondale, I happened to have the first iPhone because I was in Denver that morning at the AT&T store, and I came up to Fat Tie, and Bob Nagley attacked me because he saw the iPhone, and we've been friends ever since. And so, to think that what technology has enabled, of connection for good and bad. I have teens, and I'm very aware of, what technology could harm and suck people's heads inside of phones. But the ability to FaceTime, this is Jetson stuff from when we were kids.
Yeah, it truly is. So you would consider yourself an optimist, but I also notice that you're very well researched. So there's a combination between experience, research or investigation, and optimism. Are those the ingredients that guide your investment strategies?
I try and put a different wrapper on it. One, I'm still a student. Things are complicated and evolving all the time. That, humble pie is awaiting anyone who thinks too much of themselves. Okay. Because of my own mistakes, my very obvious mistakes that were led into why I'm doing the other thing I'm doing, is that I want to live a life of connection with my activities and my investments. So take a simple example of Netflix. I thought when it came on and we became a subscriber, it was a wonderful service. And I think it was either $7.99 or $12.99. They gained subscribers all over the world, and the access to all this content was unbelievable. And there is really good content there as well as garbage. But if I'm going to live a life as a subscriber, using my dollars consistently and being a loyal customer, then I want to have the opportunity to be an investor. We are making decisions all the time with our money. And hopefully we're making those decisions out of companies that we respect their services or their products, and maybe even their values. You have a choice to do all of these. Well, if I'm going to hold a Visa card over a MasterCard, if I'm going to use an iPhone versus an Android, then I could also have some of my investments in these companies that I favor. If I'm going to wear a certain brand of clothing because of I like their quality, or tennis shoe because I like their comfort, then I have the chance to participate. And so in this disconnect of the income inequalities or asset inequalities, part of it is that some people have chosen to be investors. My father never, okay? So the transition in my life is that Tom and Michael were investors. They wanted to participate in things that they thought were doing good, okay? Helping people. So imagine, the great pharmaceutical companies that solve some issues through there, as well as entertainment companies, travel companies, airlines, all of this. So you don't want to own every company, but if you looked at if your life, here's a subset of companies, and the best exercise is to just go into your accounting system, checkbook, and look where you spend the money. And you'll be really surprised. And then if you happen to weight it by where you spend the most money, so go back, Amazon happened in front of everybody's eyes. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff Bezos on his early roadshow and listened to his wonderful laughter, the greatest chuckle. And when the boxes started arriving at an accelerating pace to homes across the country, it was this message. Here's something that's, being useful for people, especially in rural areas that couldn't. It's just a way of living to think of participating along with capitalism and finance as a shareholder, so that you have a chance at the end of the day that the very company, the products that you supported, turns into investments that enable you to have capital to then be generous.
So in one sense, you're supporting the company, and in one sense, you're seeing that you and others are liking this product, and so there's a potential for a return as well.
Every choice you make, what you eat, where you go, where you stay, where you fly, what you drive, it's really mind-boggling how deep it is. So I have a spreadsheet on my desk at home or at work where I just make categories. I'm like, who do I do with financial services, insurance, restaurants? There's maybe some healthier options between like Sweet Green or Kava now, but it used to be McDonald's and Burger King and all that.
Yeah.
There's this evolution. So, yeah, there's just the opportunity to be aligned with your life choices and your investment choices.
I've really been enjoying our discussion and appreciate your beautiful reflections on the past and your history and what led you to this moment that we are at right now. I wanted to ask you about, you worked in Carbondale in the bond industry as an advisor, and please tell us about the transition that's occurred over the last several years for you.
So after 21 years at Janus, I moved up here. I love the mountains in the West, and I hated the drive back on Sunday mornings trying to beat traffic. Yeah, and bought my own little piece of land and horses for a while. Yeah,
Dirt and horses.
Dirt and horses, yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed working with individuals more than masses. And so I had a small business focus on high net worth individuals, on bonds, fixed income, those that were just trying to live off the income that the capital they had already generated.
And so bonds are often used, with my limited understanding, as a way of wealth preservation, oftentimes, versus equities, stocks. Are bonds also considered equities?
No.
Okay, so equities, stocks are often or can be more assertive or aggressive in terms of investing.
Absolutely. So bonds are loans that get repaid at par. You invest $1,000, you get $1,000 back at maturity, but you earned your income during the time. Whereas stock is a portion of ownership of a company for the good or the bad. And over time, many equities have performed incredibly and been one of the greatest wealth building opportunities of our generation, certainly depending on when you started the game, right, before the Depression and recessions. So, yeah, I operated on the bond side. It was the more conservative side that was actually quite fitting for my, early upbringing. But I was around the stock market at Janus was primarily an equity firm. And so, yeah, it really gave me both sides. And, the investment business is the investment business because great financial crisis, there were people leveraging mortgages, bonds, so to speak, to buy things that were out of reach. Yeah, but I had this great experience before I came up here that Michael, after he left Janus and retired, Michael, my second greatest mentor, didn't have any children, and he was thoughtful about his future. And while he was dating a woman he never married, he asked me if I would care for his estate, be the personal representative of his estate when he passed, with the charge of giving away all of his money. And Michael had the interesting fortune, because I mentioned he was kind of the Forrest Gump of finance, that in his early upbringing, he attended Lakeside School in Seattle, Washington. And that was in the 50s. He returned in the 70s to become a foundation director, and he taught history. And while he was up there, two young men inquired, because they knew he was an investor, and said, "Look, we are starting a computer company," and they flipped the X's and O's on the cards. "Would you be interested in investing?" And Michael said, "I don't understand anything about computing." But he really favored these young men, and that turned out to be Bill Gates and Paul Allen. And there is a closet where Bill Gates used to crawl through a window, I've seen this, and Paul Allen to create code, because they cut a deal with the school that if they'd help with the school schedule, that they were allowed to use this computing power, which was a teletype machine that the school mothers had raised money for. Michael's ending net worth was much higher than he ever expected. He'd lived a life of humility. He was a philanthropist all of his life, and he cared greatly about several causes, of which he laid out 5 themes that I execute now, with the board of directors approving, to diminish his net worth each year. It actually has a 10-year lifespan to it all. We're in our 2nd year right now. And
this is the McGoldricks,
the MEMCF, Michael E. McGoldrick Charitable Foundation, that I established for him. But connecting the question to the story was, he passed in December 2021, and the financial markets were just about to enter a tumultuous period, with interest rates rising from the lows from COVID, and trying to balance the mandate of dealing with estate issues, valuing an estate, dealing with lawyers, was a little too much for me. And so, if anybody thinks I, was going to escape a great life with no challenges, it came towards me. Mm-hmm. And through all the periods of Wall Street, crashes and ups and downs, and being an investor of other people's money during 9/11, there was a lot of periods of challenge, volatility that could create a lot of anxiety. And I had always been a good sleeper. I was really able to navigate this well. But I really took it personally when I, in a smaller company, was managing other people's money. And the thing that they hate is if they're losing money. And that period we were down. And so I took it probably too personally. And I started feeling the consequences, and my mental health rapidly diminished. And I was struggling. And it really created a lot of compassion for me, even for people that go through periods that, I had never been before, when you can't, things are foggy and you can't quite see clearly. And I had dear friends all my life, and, they were just flabbergasted that I would be in this place, but I was. And so Jeff Patterson here locally, I was working with as a coach, and the men's group that I was in was helpful, but it was incompatible to dedicate as much time and effort. And I was really worked hard, and I was coming in at 6 a.m. And then when I couldn't sleep at night because my mind was racing, is when I could see my average heartbeat was higher. I wear a whoop so I could see what was going on. I realized that I had to make a change. And so, I decided to shut my business down and embrace the invitation that Michael had given me, to help him. I couldn't do both at once. It was really hard to admit. I wasn't how I used to be, and I couldn't see things as clearly.
Now, how did you end up choosing between Michael's estate and running that and the business that you had built over many years and all those relationships that are so important to you because you're a relationship person?
Some businesses are going to be great and some were good. I had a nice little business, but I was really working too hard for the reward. And I realized that I had all the personal risk through that if something was to really happen, and it didn't turn out as bad as I, in my worst times were predicting. But it actually was an easy decision once it came. And it's hard to make a transition in life. There's identities that, especially as an investor and a portfolio manager, and things that associate yourself. For all these years, I had this identity, mailroom on up. Maybe I was a little too proud of that, but to give up that identity was a great challenge. But what happened is that in this midst, I went to this seminar that Brian Johnson had put on, and very interesting young peer, who started with philosopher's notes, stoicism, all of that, and then created this app that's like to help humanity flourish, to improve your soul force, called Heroic, which he has tattooed on his arm, and Arate on the other arm, of reaching your true full potential if you actually knew it. And at that seminar, one speaker said, hey, if you want to find a good exercise, write your own obituary. And so, still mourning the passing of Michael and dealing with all this frustration, I did. And it came out pretty quick that I wanted to give back for all the wonderful mentorship that I'd been given. And the paragraph that just came out of, spirit was, to create the most sought after youth financial camp in the country. I just left it that simple. And
how did that just appeared within your mind, or what triggered that, wanting to create a financial youth camp to help?
I don't exactly know, but it came. I had started another initiative called Aspen Women's Wealth, and I was a little disappointed that middle-aged women really weren't making changes. And I figured, who could I influence more? And that would be kids. And then understanding the power of compounding, that time is on your side when you're young, the ability to take modest amounts of capital and grow it when you have 50 years, this magic formula, call it, the golden opportunity, would be best fit for students. And I had volunteered at the school. I had a ice cream class called Earl's. It was a business class in disguise. But really the finance camp turned out to be a Trojan horse for mentorship to kids. And just last weekend at the Aspen College Fair, I saw students from the past 3 camps that are exploring their next venture into education. And it was a joy to see. The greatest dividends I've ever received aren't from financial assets. They're from the kids that I get to mentor. And to see them grow. And, one young man was just wearing the suit and tie, going to college interviews. I was like, I see you. Yeah, this is such a good reminder. So, the camp has just been my opportunity and recognition because, as I said, all of my mentors have passed. And it takes a while in our lives, I'm almost 61, to digest and comprehend what happened. It really takes time. And so as that's gone on.
Meaning what happened in your life?
Yeah, how lucky we all are in our own ways of who we've had in our life. And to be able to give that gift back to some kids that may need it the most. I've just had such inspirational men in my life that, say, you never know on the right day what you say could really save a life. And I had some early experiences teaching. I've had some suicide in my history, not directly in my family, but with friends and college roommates. And I just know how short those triggers are. I told a story at a high school classroom one day that a young woman came up afterwards and asked me if it was true. And I said, yeah, it's true. I was always going to have a plan B if things ever got tough. So to approach some really difficult subjects and hold some space for kids, I've had some really interesting situations in my little camp.
How does the camp work and how do people learn about the camp? And give us a few details about that camp.
So we have a website, thefinancecamp.com. Every January through April is going to open enrollment. On the website, it says learn how to apply. So kids answer several questions of why they want to learn and what they want to learn and what do they think of Wall Street. They don't have to have any prior experience. And then I bring all these kids in to interview and I watch everything about them. And I'm trying to curate a good room from kids up and down the valley. And I want it to be from here on purpose. I've been asked to do otherwise, and I keep reconsidering because I can still have a connection to them in their formative years. And
so right now it's a local.
It is a local.
Personal endeavor.
It is. If they interview successfully and we choose, and I've actually asked the same 10 questions for 3 years now.
And so there's a vetting process.
Yeah. One of the questions is, what is the hardest thing you've ever done in your life or been through in your life, and what did you learn from it? And some kids are really honest. It's been touching to see how honest they are. So those kids have been in the camp where they have some unique circumstances going on, and if I can teach them money, but at the same time share hope and optimism and opportunity and any guidance that they might find helpful, that has been really rewarding.
And tell me what you believe money means and how can it be of service to these younger people?
Yeah, sadly, in our schools, we're not really taught, the ethos of money or basic financial skills, although there is changing. There was a law passed last year that's going to require all districts to teach financial literacy as part of a graduation requirement. It doesn't start for another year or so as they get funding. But mine is more investing, so it's not budgeting, savings. It's more, how do you make investments? How do you find investments? So what I think that kids may learn, besides the history from the very first stock in the entire world, and how the exchanges were created and all the famous cinema that's out there for kids to enjoy, some of it's exaggerated, like The Wolf of Wall Street. I'm very disappointed that that's the movie they've watched more than others through there. But it can show how the system works. I want the kids to understand how they can participate in the system. And whether you have modest earnings in your life, you can find security. You can make a plan for financial security. And so simply $1,000 today to a 15-year-old is worth $74,000 in their future. The kids that come into my camp, after doing community service, I give them $500. And they're with me for a week.
How many kids do you accept each camp?
About 15 that come through. At the end of the fifth day, I give them an exam. I'm like, this is the exam you do want to take, because if you pass the exam and you can get 75% correct, I'm going to give you an additional $750. Now, I really believe this. There's a lot of simulation stock market games out there. But when kids have skin in the game, like it's great in life to have true skin in the game, they make different decisions. So the kids, there's only been one kid that didn't pass the exam over the 3 years. So they each have $1,250 in investment accounts. I forgot, they all have to have an account before they come. They open before.
They learn how to do that. You teach them how to do that.
They make their first trade the first day, second day. Yeah, and we're scanning for opportunities while we're backfilling, the knowledge of Wall Street. And then they begin, at the end of camp, begins a competition for a $5,000 prize. So this wonderful young woman, Emma Jane Mallory, from 3 years ago, won the $5,000. She came to the little forum we had a few weeks ago. And so here's a young woman with probably over $10,000 to her name at 16 years old. Now that $10,000, that's $740,000 for her future.
In how many years when you say
in 50 years?
In 50
at
years.
Average market returns. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And unless you've run the math, it's unbelievable. At the time, my kids were 11, and they said, well, Dad, we're not 15, we're 11. How much is 54 years of compounding? So what do you think is the difference between 74 times your money for 50 years and 54 years? How many more do you think you would get?
I don't know, but please share.
Take a guess.
Okay, so tell me again.
Your money can multiply 74-fold over 50 years. Call it 74x. 1,000 turns into 74,000.
Okay.
With an additional 4 years of compounding, what do you think the difference is?
How much above
74? Yeah.
I'm going to guess 115.
That's a good guess. Okay. It's like 101.
101.
Okay. Yeah. So it's phenomenal. So it's a parabolic increase of money working for itself.
Okay.
So the message to kids is get in the game and let your money work for you, right? So stay away from credit card debt and borrowings as much as you can. Money today is your future. And so whatever your profession, doesn't matter. If you can get some money early on saved, and I was also trying to get kids before cars and college, and then hopefully teach them to leave it alone, figure out how to finance that. But this is your future.
So what are the age groups of the camp?
Yeah. 14 to 17 is the ideal age. And juniors in high school is the limit so that they're here on their senior year. I'll take a senior if they're going to be around the entire senior year. But yeah, as an ode to my mentors and the greatest gifts that they gave me of financial education and world education, I'm trying to share it in a magnified boot camp accelerated version here in our small valley. And I do take it quite seriously, and I think it's good to have goals. And so I adopted the mentality that I want to take 100 kids and turn them into millionaires or help them have $1 million portfolios before I die. So hopefully I've got some time that I'll receive a few messages back from kids that by giving them money skills. So of course, yeah, I had it tattooed on my arm.
Can you?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a tattoo pop up to do that. But yeah, I feel blessed. I feel blessed from the men and the women in my life, and been fortunate to have really great hands-on. And that goes to the point when, why don't you take it bigger? I want to know the kids. I know their parents. I see them. I want to hear the stories.
How often and how do you meet with them? What's the connection?
Well, I'm learning how to do better on that because, the first year students, once they graduated, they could ping me. We, shared numbers, contact. I have an Instagram account, at the finance camp. And I put messages from travels or updates on the camp and ideas. I mean, there really is, this DeFi, this democratization of finance that's going on, that's creating access for so many people. The world is really going to change. I mean,
Yeah.
there has been changes, but
We're in a place of very accelerated change, right?
yeah. And it's hard when you're older to stay loose. I have young kids, so I'm seeing new things, but, if we evolve, hopefully that helps.
You mentioned previously to this episode that you also have a WhatsApp group.
So that was my first solution to the problem of how do I keep in touch with them is if you're a graduate of the finance camp or went through any of our modest programs that on this, we call it the Finance Camp 100, relate to the 100 kids. I share ideas and they can respond, they can ask questions. So here I am using technology again as a way to keep in touch with kids. And I'll tell you this story that happened this summer that we were in South Africa and this young man greeted us at the airport. And as we were walking through, Thobani asked me what I did, and I told him I run a finance camp. He's like, I would love to learn finance. Yeah, I said, all right, well, let's exchange, follow the camp here. And then we DM'd each other, and I just kept thinking about it. And I said, I'll tell you, I'm going to make you a deal. If you can get an account opened, by the time I come back to the airport, I'll give you $100 to, get started. And he was so delightful, and he was so welcoming and grateful, and he did it. And so I had to wire him the money through a South African bank, which is a little tricky to do. But when I asked for his address and I found out where he lived, and he lived in a township underneath a tin roof outside of Cape Town. And it just struck me as like, wow, I could have a chance to help with a very modest amount. And so Thobani is part of the 100 camp through this small interaction. I'm not too particular about it. And he had he texted me about his first trade where he had made some money, and I was just so excited for him. And so, yeah, I'm open to help where Spirit sends me. And I think through these interactions in Hong Kong or New York or wherever that happened in my life, that there's nothing better than being able to share the gifts and wisdom and insight that were just so generously given to me.
So, Ron, I have to ask, we have a financial guru here sitting in front of me. Humble.
Bad word. Bad word.
Now, where is the stock market going? Where's the bond market going? And just very simply, can you tell us about crypto?
Wow.
And
who thought we were going here?
just briefly as we close, I mean, what is your personal crystal ball?
Wow.
Share about.
How dare you? Here's my take. Let's understand where we've been and what's happened.
Being that you and your family were a part of the Great Depression and the stock market crash of 1929 to where we are now, how can you give us a little bit of information?
So for anybody that's going to hit the measure here, the stock market is up again this year. It's been several years in a row post this dramatic recovery of COVID. There will be volatility ahead. So two ways to answer the question. Depending on how old you are, you may want to take it differently. To the kids in the finance camp, you might hope for a crash. You might hope for a major pullback, let's call it 20%, right? It will happen in their lifetime. It'll happen in my lifetime. You can't exactly predict the 9/11s that come out of the blue.
Yeah.
So with the perspective of what is a possible outcome that you wouldn't want to be over your skis, especially after multiple years of recovery, all right? So if you're wagering, these are intelligent probabilities and gambles, you may want to put more chips on the table when those are suffering, right? I like to buy people's pain. When they can't see a way out, I try and pull out an ounce of optimism if possible to increase an exposure to something I may believe in. Okay, so we talked about the sixth wave of innovation. AI, there's a lot of spin going on. It may be too much, or we may be creating the capability of compute that will solve a lot of problems and possibly clean energy. Now, connect the dots to coal and steam energy, to true clean energy, micro nukes, all of this. And reduced traffic incidents because of robo-taxis. There's some positive aspects to this. When I say I want to bet on the home team, I don't want to bet against Elon Musk, because do you think you might actually own a robot in the future that could do all autonomous work for you, mow your lawn, clean your house, all these things, that maybe run restaurants? These things are very likely to happen in our lifetimes. So I want to be an investor in the future, but I have to be willing to withstand some pain in the short term, and there will be pain. So if you are 100% in on stocks and no cash, probably too aggressive right now. Mm-hmm. If you're negative and we're fearful, you might miss out on some of the greatest, again, wealth building opportunities. But I always say that financial markets are like a fraternity party. You can't prevent people from over drinking. It's going to happen. The cops are going to show up. Everybody's going to leave. It's human nature. Again. Okay. Yeah. So now let's go to crypto. And, I have a chart that
Well, before we get to crypto, what about bonds?
Bonds are a tool, for retirement. It's always say your grandparents own bonds and muni bonds to just collect the income. And rates are higher than they were several years ago, but they're in the middle of this very long-term 100-year trend. Mm-hmm. So bonds are a very important part of your portfolio. 30-some% in bonds and 30-some% in stocks, 30% real estate, and 10% in crypto and alternatives. So a diversified portfolio. Mm-hmm. If you're young, more stocks, more crypto, more risk.
What about metal?
Gold's a part of it. Yeah. Gold just hit 4,000 this morning, and people were still worried about inflation. They're worried about governments, which then relates to crypto. Crypto is an expression of people's distaste for the U.S. government and the system of printing money. And the wonderful invention of Bitcoin with a limited supply creates a unique dynamic, more so than Ether, XRP, and meme coins is a whole other thing. The decision on crypto, and in our camp, we had the most incredible experience. Another one really worthy of seeing. I was looking for someone to speak about crypto to a camp. The camp was June 23. June 23, I was in Miami. My friend went out on a date, and they left me in the bar. I'm listening to some jazz. See this guy standing next to me. I'm like, they're really good, aren't they? We started speaking, and he asked me what I did. I run a camp. I said, but I'm looking for someone to talk about crypto, teach these kids. He's like, well, I'm like, what are you doing here? He's like, well, I'm speaking at the cryptocurrency conference tomorrow. I'm the chairman of BitZero. His name was Akbar Shamji, okay? And he was a British Indian. And he said, I love what you're doing. I'd love to help. I said, wow. I said, look, I'm going to follow up on this. Don't think I'm just going to let this slide. And so I thought he lived in the United States. He had bought an underground nuclear bunker abandoned in North Dakota to put a data center for the crypto mining as well as AI. Unbeknownst to me, he owns this up there. He was going to fly from London to Carbondale to teach these kids about crypto. I asked about hotels. I'm like, what? I said, just please zoom in to us. So Akbar Shamji gave a lecture to my first year students about the history of money. Wow. From the Knights Templar to those who enforce rules of commerce, to double ledger accounting, debits and credits, to then triple ledger accounting on the blockchain. So he created this perspective, and Bitcoin was trading at 20,000, and today it's 124,000. Okay, it was high level stuff that I enjoyed immensely, and so each year we've had crypto experts kind of lay out, the way, and so the term crypto maxi is someone who's all in and hates other assets.
Yeah.
Okay, but I had several experiences in the last few years of people that I met that were involved in crypto that just helped me get more modestly involved. And so the decision, and this is a couple ways to make decisions. One is I call it the rule of halves. And that is if I feel motivated, if the world's come together and gives me some information, then I take action on half. Because if I'm correct, I'll be glad that I did half. And if I'm incorrect, I'll be glad I only did half. But it keeps me active.
So explain that again. Explain that. We'll close with that. Explain that one more.
The rule of halves says if the world is telling you to do something, the spirit, your energy is like, I think I should.
Yes.
Then give yourself permission to do half of it. This is primarily investing world. Because if you're correct, you'll be glad you did half. But if you're wrong, you'll be glad you only did half. And you give yourself a chance to maybe at a lower price. Mm-hmm. But more involved, it keeps you engaged and it helps you get off the fence. And so Akbar and a few others have helped because here's my call. I'm going to own crypto for at least 20 years. And I can't worry about what it's priced today or tomorrow or the next year. If I can keep that idea, it'll help me survive the inevitable declines. And in the stock market, there's been inevitable declines. But if you're an optimist and hopeful for the future, then you can have a positive outcome. And it's a modest portion of an overall portportfolio. Mm-hmm. And let's end with this. Another way to make decisions. I don't want to have regrets. When I remodeled that building, people told me not to do it. And I said, if I have to walk by that building, if someone else did it, and I had to walk by that building and see them doing it, then I'm going to regret not taking the chance.
Yeah.
And so, it's an inverse way of thinking about what, were you willing to leave this on the table or let's go? So I'm glad I took this chance to sit with you.
Oh, Ron, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you and everything you shared. And I know that this episode is going to support people. I really am so grateful for the work that you're doing in terms of paying it forward. I really feel like we're at a time in the world and our lives, culture and such, where collaboration and service to other and such are so important if we're going to positively evolve as a species. Is that we have to move out of the egoic service to self and move into the service to other. Yeah. And I honor you for doing it.
Thanks. I think age helps on this. And let me say that when you were building this venue, and I was over there, and my father was in between us, I actually made the decision to engage. Like I need to walk in the house and see what's going on. And so you have made an offering to the community that I hope people really appreciate, because it's not modest, it's significant, and you continue to do it. And so there are many others, my mentors and others here in town, that I've admired what they've done, and it's motivating to others. So thanks for doing that for all of us.
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
And any other way people can get in touch with you, or just the Finance Camp?
Finance Camp, Instagram, website. I'm around. It's a small town.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me on Connection is the Medicine. This podcast is sponsored by the Connection is the Medicine Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to co-creating connection to self, community, nature, and spirit. I hope this conversation inspires you to connect with deeper meaning and purpose in your life. To learn more about our offerings at True Nature in Carbondale, Colorado, and Loma Sagrada in Nosara, Costa Rica, please visit connectionisthemedicine.com. Blessings on your day, and I look forward to visiting with you again soon.